Hey everybody, this is Cindy Allen, Editor-in-Chief of Interior Design, and I am here with my very good friend, the Executive Vice President and CEO of IIDA, Cheryl Durst, and we have a partnership that is meaningful and will help us move into the future. Cheryl, tell us about DesignUnity.
I'm so excited about DesignUnity because it gives us, IIDA and interior design, a true opportunity to have effect on the future of design, right? We live so much in the moment, and I think the conversations that you and I share about students, about emerging professionals, about everybody working now, completely vital, completely relevant. But I'm thinking about that next generation of designers, and DesignUnity is all about what we can do, kind of our aggregate power as a profession. So it's not about your brand, it's not about my brand, it's about what we can do together to support our industry.
And I have to say, I just want everyone to know out there, like Cheryl and I have known each other and been close friends in the last 5 years, let's say. And we have had late night talks about wanting to do something meaningful together. And we'd even a few years ago, we'd try to stir up something, but it was always difficult. And it was only this year, with all the heartache and all the strife, we both almost at the same time said, oh, it's this. This is the thing, right?
Yeah. And it's that, what our collective power as women in this industry, right, and as leaders, and I think our ability to create some momentum. You use the word, there's so much hurt and heartache and pain, and companioning that are all these questions. I think people want to know personally, what can they do to affect change and access and equity in our industry? Not only what can firms do, what can product manufacturers do, but what can we as individuals do?
And Cheryl, I mean, you've always been a leader, and a Black woman who's a leader, like in our industry. And I've always felt a deep kinship with you, but I don't know what it's like to walk in your shoes. But on the other hand, having you as somebody who has done so much for our industry, it kind of only makes sense that you would lead in this way.
I can't not be me, if that makes sense, right?
Oh, yeah,
and so,
I know that.
So what I bring to the table as a Black woman, as a woman of color, I think about all the experiences that you and I share, right? As women, as leaders, we get questioned, right, about our ability. But I think about the way that I navigate the world. You and I inhabit the same world, we inhabit the same industry, but I have an abiding awareness that I need to navigate the world differently than you do, right? Than men do, than anyone. And I think it's vital for design and designers to understand, even if you don't live that experience,
right,
to understand that there are communities that navigate the world and therefore navigate space, that navigate created space differently. And so understanding how we make those experiences relevant and meaningful and equitable is just critical to our future as an industry.
And as you said, we really can, in the positions we're in, affect change. So it's hard, but that's the exciting part of it all, right? That hopefully, Cheryl, you and I will look back and say, oh, we actually really made a difference in a way that we didn't expect, like you asked us a decade ago, right?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Let's talk a little bit about you. So last week we celebrated Hall of Fame, and I inducted you in 2016. I can't believe it's gone so fast already, right?
4 years.
I know,
4 years.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't know what was happening to you right before you got inducted. Would you share that story?
Sure. Short version, I was being trolled and harassed by someone who was sending me messages and emails and voicemails and repeatedly using the N-word, and essentially saying to me that I had no right to do what I did, to be in the position that I was in. We never found out who that person was. And it was kind of an interesting juxtaposition because that happened to me 20 plus years ago when I first became the CEO of IIDA. There was an anonymous letter that was left at IIDA headquarters saying that an N-word will never be the CEO of this organization. It couldn't be countenanced or stood for, and a whole bunch of words were spelled incorrectly. So, but it was that reminder that so many people who look like me, that there are folks out there who don't want to see us in positions of power and in positions of leadership. And my parents had always told me, you lead with grace, dignity, and intellect. And that's what I've always tried to do. It angered me, it saddened me, it frightened me.
Yeah, it was scary.
And I remember you reaching out. I had posted something on Facebook, which I use as kind of a soapbox platform. And I posted a story, frankly. And I hope that the person who was trolling me read that. But I wanted my community to know that hate lives amongst us. You know, we don't, you know, as much as we're in this bubble in design, we're not immune to hate.
Right.
And I wanted folks to know about it. But it made me, when you inducted me, it made me hold my head even higher.
For everyone out there, like at the time that happened to Cheryl, like I spend months sort of figuring out who I'm going to get in, who I'm going to induct into the whole thing, because it's only 4 people every year, right? And so that was the week, that was the planned week of calling Cheryl with this amazing news. And then I see the post, and you know, and I was in tears, frankly. So I called you and I said, this is either the worst time or the best time. I'm not really sure. I would just remember that being a really special moment that we had together when, like, when I, you know, inducted you over the phone to get ready to induct you, right?
Well, in that moment, Cindy, it was someone out there so sought to diminish me and demean me. And within 48 hours, I had this phone call from you. And the most important thing you said to me was, I see you. And I fast forward to this moment that we're in now. And equity is so much about people being seen and people being heard. And the fact that that award, that was the first time that you all had bestowed a leadership award. So you were acknowledging my leadership in the industry at a moment where I was demoralized and felt so low and questioned myself and my ability. And those 3 words, the power of those 3 words, I see you. And then to fast forward, you know, to that moment on stage and standing then at the Waldorf in front of 1,500 people, and to be able to tell my story and to have 1,500 people see me and hear me. I wish everyone out there, that every single person who has felt diminished could have that feeling of being seen and heard. It's validation, and it's so critical to who we are as human beings.
Yeah, I just got chills thinking about it all. And by the way, like, okay, she like freaking brought the house down. Can I just say, you know, so loved and so respected about what you do. You know, meanwhile, there's so much more that we can do for others, and certainly in healing and moving forward and bringing people together. We always talk about community, so there's more community that we want to bring together.
Right. And I think that so many moments in our community as design, we have to continue to push those boundaries of opening those moments, so that, you know, all of those young designers or middle-aged designers, I don't care how old you are, so that you feel seen and heard and celebrated and validated. And that's why I think that conversations that we will have through DesignUnity will be important to collect and gather those voices. I think the continued celebration of the work in your magazine of the diverse community of designers. I think of the little 8-year-old young, you know, little girl or little boy who doesn't even have a word yet for what they want to be, but it is interior design. and for them to see the work and to see the faces and to hear the voices of designers who look like them. So that pipeline is so critical. And we all have a responsibility to that pipeline. I don't care what color you are, but we all have a responsibility to that pipeline because of all those communities who don't even understand design. And I'm really excited about kind of our joint action item, what we're calling the Talent Collective.
Right.
And it's a way for IIDA and interior design. I hate the word aggregate, but I'm going to use it. It's a way for us to aggregate and convene and gather talent out there that hasn't traditionally been exposed to the magazine, hasn't traditionally been exposed to opportunities. I'll have a super honest, real moment for you, kind of post the George Floyd video. I heard from so many firms saying, okay, Cheryl, can you help us we want to find Black designers, we want to find brown designers. I don't know where to find them. And that was very real and honest in the moment. And we all know that our folks in the industry need to maybe rethink where they're recruiting and how they're recruiting. But the Talent Collective was born to kind of gather talent and expose them not only to job and employment opportunities, but opportunities to share their portfolios, to share their CVs with the magazine as well, so that you can continue to celebrate diverse talent, but also so that diverse talent can have increased opportunities at firms or with product manufacturers. I'm really excited about the Talent Collective and the fact that it was born of this conversation about what can we do.
I couldn't be more excited to be doing with you, frankly.
Yeah. It's, all the stories that can be told about our profession, about design, and about being strategic, about supporting humanity. And the more voices that tell those stories, the more expanded design has become. What design does best is illuminate, right? It illuminates the good and the wonderful, and it illuminates sometimes the not so good. But we need to see it, because in order to solve anything, it must be seen.
So we have like this kind of amazing day together, right?
What a group! What a group! They're, they are friends and family, which I love. But we had George Bandy, globally recognized sustainability expert, Gabrielle Bullock with Perkins and Will, Karen Compton with 3K Consulting, Gisue Hariri with Hariri and Hariri, who's just such a mentor to so many. And then, of course, Dina Griffin, architect of record for the Obama Center, and who also did the Modern Wing, and just a dear friend.
Yeah, she's amazing. And then we had Mike Johnson from Perkins and Will in DC. We had our young gun, who is so positive, Krystal Lucero, amazing. Yeah. And then, of course, our big heavy hitter and the loveliest guy, actually from Cuba, Carlos Martinez. And then Mavis Wiggins from TPG, who everyone adores, who got a big leadership award at the IIDA.
Yeah, amazing. Such an amazing group. It was an honor to get them all in one place.
It certainly was.
It wasn't easy to get them all in one place, but such an honor to have them all in one place and to have such a candid, open conversation with them.
It was. And once we got them all together, they didn't want to leave. And that's always a good sign too.
Which means we absolutely need to do a part 2.
Exactly. So part 2 is coming up in 2021. But meanwhile, you got to stick around and watch all day DesignUnity, partnership with Interior Design and IIDA. Cheryl, I love you. God bless you. And let's help the world a little.
Yeah. Brava and onward, Cindy. Onward.
Yes, absolutely. Right.
And I love that we're doing this together. So
me too. Together for the good of design and humanity, for sure. Okay, so everyone stay tuned. It's a full day. It's coming up right now. Hey everyone, this is Cindy Allen, Editor-in-Chief of Interior Design, and welcome to a very special program, the kickoff to a new initiative to promote positive change in our industry. Now, first things first, I am not the sole host of this roundtable, and I would normally never relinquish the mic, but instead I am honored to share the role with my dear friend, the brilliant Executive Vice President and CEO of IIDA, Cheryl Durst.
Hey, Cindy.
Hey, Cheryl and I are passionate and compassionate leaders who frankly give a damn, right, Cheryl?
That's right.
And together with our collective mega brands, Interior Design and IIDA, are excited to announce a new partnership championing racial equity, diversity, and inclusion in design. And we're calling it DesignUnity. Right, Cheryl?
That's right, Cindy. This whole conversation started because you and I felt the need to do something together.
Right.
And the events over the summer and the collision of the pandemic with the pandemic of racial unrest, you and I wanted to figure out a way how we could galvanize the industry. But we both recognize the importance of, particularly within equity, that it starts with a conversation, because conversation is all about being seen and being heard. And I just love the fact that this, at 3 a.m. in the morning, we talked about the importance of human beings relating to one another with stories, personal and professional. And then look at who we've gathered.
I know.
Join us in this conversation.
Kind of amazing. All right, kick it off. We're going to go back and forth, Cheryl. Okay.
We're going to go back and forth. Should we start with some introductions? So let's start with my friend, George Bandy. Hey, George.
Hey, Cheryl, how are you? Hey, Cindy.
Hi, so nice to see you. And then we also have Gabrielle Bullock. She's the Principal Director of Global Diversity at Perkins and Will in LA. Hey, Gabrielle.
Hey, Cindy. Hi, Cheryl.
Hey there. And we have Karen Compton, who's the principal with A3K Consulting. Cheers, Karen.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And then next we have Gisue Hariri, co-founder and creative principal director with her sister Moshgun at Hariri and Hariri Architecture. Hey, Gisue.
Hi, everyone. So honored to be among such amazing, amazing designers.
And from Chicago, homegirl, Dina Griffin with IDEA Interactive Design. Hey, Dina.
Hi, everyone. It's so great to see you.
Next, we have Carlos Martinez, principal at Gensler. Hey, Carlos.
Hey, Cindy. Hey, Cheryl. Hi.
Hey there.
For having me.
And from Washington, D.C., Mike Johnson, Senior Associate with Perkins and Will. Greetings, Mike, from a town where a lot of stuff is happening right now.
Unfortunately and fortunately. Thank you, Cheryl and Cindy, for having me.
And we have, the one and only Mavis Wiggins, Managing Executive and Studio Creative Director at TPG Architecture. Hey, Mavis.
So happy to be included in this group. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Cheryl. Love you guys. And thank you, everybody. I know all you guys.
And hey, don't forget Krystal, Cheryl.
Yeah, we can't forget. Here she is. So I'm going to shout you out a little bit for being our youngest panelist member of this roundtable. Krystal Lucero from Austin, Texas. And Krystal is with Edwards+Mulhausen, where she is a senior interior designer and just doer of all good things and a powerful woman in her own right. Cheers, Krystal, and welcome.
Thank you, Cindy and Cheryl. I appreciate you guys so much.
So nice to see you again, Krystal. So Cheryl, we had talked about getting the whole group to get to know each other as well, right? So yeah, why don't you kick it off?
Right. Well, how about designers are storytellers, right, Cindy?
Yeah.
And I think what we'd love for each of you to do, recognizing, we don't have a lot of time, but if you could give a thumbnail sketch of who you are and a little bit about your journey, how you got to this moment. And I want to tee up with you, George, if you can start us off. Opelika, Alabama,
Hey.
A guy from a small town, and you're now a leader in sustainability, a globally recognized leader in sustainability. How'd you get from Opelika to here?
Well, I had a few scholarships to play ball, but my father went to Morehouse and he said that's where his money was going. So I ended up attending Morehouse and was in the reserves and served in Iraq. And when I came back from Iraq, I had the privilege of going out to the West Coast and being in the West Coast. I attended a Natural Step conference where Paul Hawken and Amory Lovins and all the norms that you might know across the platform were there. Fortunate enough, there were two gentlemen there that actually recruited me to go and become the sustainability officer for the University of Texas in 1993. Actually, it was a little bit before it was popular. And so I had the privilege of kind of learning on the job and working on a couple of lead projects with Reeves Taylor from Gensler, who was the campus architect at the time, and Brian Yeoman and John Pareto. And while in that role, met Ray Anderson on the President's Council for Sustainable Development. And Ray recruited me to come to work for Interface as their VP for sustainability. And I did that for 16 and a half years, and then moved over to Mohawk, where I served for 3 years. And now I'm working as a consultant on several other projects. But during that span, served as also the chairman of the board for the United States Green Building Council. So I always have a hashtag on some things, and Cheryl laughs at it. I said, just one man from Opelika. So privileged to be here as the only non-designer and a practitioner of sustainability and serving in a capacity to support this team, and just honored to be on the panel with you guys. So thank you.
Gisue, tell us your amazing journey.
So hi, everyone. I'm actually an architect, business owner. I have a firm with my sister, Mushkan Hariri, and I was born and raised in Iran, and I came to United States in 70s, in 74, 75, to attend college for my higher education, and ended up at Cornell University School of Architecture, and did a Bachelor's of Architecture professional degree from Cornell. And then came to New York City via a year or two traveling in California, working for a few firms actually in San Francisco, spending time in the Zen Center in San Francisco, and kind of learning how to tap into my own inner voice, if you will. I realized that the School of Architecture gave me a lot of tools in terms of thinking and conceptualizing. However, I had very little knowledge in terms of construction and building, and I was not going to remain a paper architect and wanted to build. So I packed up my stuff and went to actually Arizona and worked, a few months with Paolo Soleri near Phoenix, building structures and kind of learning how to use tools and what it involves in creating all this, beautiful things that, I had in mind to build. And so that's kind of my journey from one part of the world to this part of the world. And so I just wanted to also share with you, because of the background difference, coming from Iran, which was a pretty much gender secluded. I went to a school with all women, and the thinking that I had was you come to United States where the dreams come through and where you will find equality and equity in both genders. And to my surprise, there was none of it, at least at the time being at Cornell and at the architecture program. So that's hopefully something we're going to get into later on.
Yeah, and it's something that you and your sister have struggled with your entire career.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Let's, Dina, you're a woman, you're an architect. Tell us a little bit about your journey.
Well, I wish I could say it was like everyone else's. I think the only thing I have in common is that I worked at Perkins and Will only for about 2 years, but my path to architecture was definitely not normal. I didn't even know what I wanted to do by the time I was a junior in high school. I kind of felt a little bit out of place as far as not having made that decision until I was required to choose between home economics or industrial education. And industrial education in high school at that time was welding, auto shop, carpentry. And I was like, you know what, I will do that any day over going into home economics, because I was ignorant and didn't know that that had to do with much more than just cooking and baking. So I chose industrial education, and that year, instead of teaching shop, they taught architectural drafting. And that, coupled with my incessant watching of the Brady Bunch and seeing Mike as an architect, I put 2 and 2 together and thought, oh my God, maybe I can major in this in school. And when I was on my path to doing that, I actually ran into, I've had very low resistance to my career, but in college, before I transferred to the University of Illinois, where I ended up getting my degree, I was at another school, another state school, and I was told within our first week of class, the professor addressed everyone in class and said, okay, here's what you do, here's what you'll need to do to transfer into the architecture program. And I had a question. And by the way, I was the only person of color in the class, and I was the only female in the class. And my question had something to do with, number of credit hours or whatever. And he said, I'm sorry, this doesn't apply to you. You're not going to be able to transfer into the program. And I said, why? He said, because women just don't do that. And I know he meant women, especially women of color, don't do this. But that only fueled my drive, and I ended up going to the University of Illinois and matriculating through that program with a few hiccups, like not feeling that I was on par with the rest of the students, but speaking up and advocating for myself, going to my professor and saying, this is how I'm feeling. And he told me, basically, let us work on your weaknesses. You focus on your strengths. And I ended up graduating from the program, and I truly owe him my career. And as far as Perkins and Will is concerned, kind of the same thing happened. I was working on the international terminal out at O'Hare, and I was very good at computers. And back then, not everybody was using computers. And the designer wanted some fly-throughs over the apron of the airport. And I came in on a Saturday, did that. But I realized at that moment that my voice was not being heard, and I wasn't learning, like Gisue, she wanted to learn construction. I wasn't learning how to put a building together, so I went to my boss Monday morning and said, I want to be transferred out to the field. I want to know and learn how buildings are built. And again, advocating for myself, which is one thing that I tell everyone to do. You have to speak your voice, and especially for yourself, because no one else is going to do it.
Dina, I love that the Modern Wing and the Obama Center and Terminal 5 at O'Hare have your grit and tenacity and Mike Brady and your rejection of home economics and some people who told you no to thank for, bringing you into fruition into this profession. We are a combination of so many experiences, but and there probably are a few other Mike Brady experiences out there.
That's really beautiful. Carlos, I know that you were born in Cuba and went to school at University of Puerto Rico. How did your journey get you to the United States?
I've always been a very independent kid, and I really wanted to sort of kind of explore the world, and maybe being kind of the grandson of an immigrant that went from Spain to Cuba, and my mother immigrated, and me, from Cuba. I think that notion of always moving has been in my blood. I went to the Midwest. I actually went to Ohio State, which is where I got my degree in architecture, my undergrad, and then later to Chicago for my master's. It was interesting. I was hearing some of the comments, and I now realized that when I was at Ohio State, I was the only Latino in the school. And if there were more, I never met them. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of an interesting thing. And I kind of reflecting on why I'm here today is like I've always been very design oriented. As like others that mentioned, I always wanted to be an architect, and I have always great passion for design. But I've always believed in design with purpose. That's actually been something, and now it's more clear than ever. And it's interesting, I ask myself why, and it's because I feel that design without purpose is forgettable. And who wants to do forgettable work? And the other thing that I was reflecting on was that, I was a very nice kid. I followed all the rules. I behaved, I was not a troublemaker. But when it came to design, I've always been a troublemaker. And I was looking back and remember that when I graduated from Ohio State, my professors at the end of the year, they gave me an impromptu award, and I still have it. I don't have it here. I have it in Connecticut. But they gave me an impromptu award, and the award was called the Jose Marti Award for Revolutionary Architecture. And even from that age, I've always been the contrarian. I swim against the current, and I push for things that are maybe not easy to get, but meaningful. I think that's why I'm here today.
Yeah. And that is your story, right? It wasn't easy for you to even get to the States, but you are here. And thank you so much, Carlos.
Thanks for your good trouble,
Yeah.
Carlos. And Krystal, someone described you to me as a fighter with a smile. And, you've had some odds stacked against you, and yet you disarm people with your optimism and that beautiful smile, and your approach toward life to life and design has been so positive. Can you share a little bit of your origin story with us?
Yeah, so I think the fighter with the smile kind of goes back to, I'm a breast cancer survivor. Even though I look young, I was 27 when I had breast cancer, and it's been almost 10 years now. So that's probably part of my fighter with the smile, and still working through, in our industry through the whole time. So first off, I feel honored to be on this call with all of you. I feel like all of you have been a mentor in some kind of way. But my background, I'm a Texan. I'm born and raised in Texas, started off in East Texas. And I was a Barbie girl. Like, I played sports, but I was also into Barbies. So, having a single mom, I wasn't able to get all of the things that I needed for my Barbie house. I got the dream house, but maybe there was some extra accessory I didn't get. So what I did is I made it, or I took my Sunday socks and I cut them up and made dresses for my dolls. So that was kind of my beginning of knowing that design was something that I wanted to do, and not knowing the aspect and not knowing the terminology of what an interior designer was or is at the time. And so I always thought I was going to be an architect. And then again, you mentioned I'm one of the younger people in the call. So it was the time of Trading Spaces and HGTV, kind of in the early 2000s, when I saw that term interior designer. And so seeing that term, I talked to my parents about it, and knowing that I wanted to go to school for it. And they actually went to high school with one of my professors who ran the program at Stephen F. Austin in Nacogdoches. So luckily I had parents who knew what an interior designer was, and that they were able to connect me with one of their old classmates who ran our program. So like Gabrielle, I was kind of focused at that point. So I only applied to one college. I only went to school for interior design, graduated in 4 years, and that's all I've done for the last 15 years is being an interior designer. I got registered in 2009 and knew that that was what I was gonna do too. So I'm one of those Texans that gets married at, a child age. So I definitely got married young, thought I was gonna be finished having kids by the time I was 30. And then breast cancer happened. And so that definitely kind of changed my perspective on life. And so fighting with a smile has kind of been always my approach, and not saying no to any opportunities. So even things like this, like obviously I'm super nervous and inspired by the people that I'm with, but I'm never going to say no to any opportunities that are put in front of me. So I appreciate you guys asking me to be on this panel.
Krystal, your light just shines through, you're kind of an amazing child. Yeah. Yeah. And she said, I think I'm one of the youngest. No, you are the youngest. Okay. Let's get it straight.
Cindy, a direction I think I'd like to take, there are a couple things. I want to come back to a remark that Mike made about validity. But before I go there, I'd love to ask, and this is open to the group, so anyone who wants to jump in with an answer, have you ever felt in life and work that the odds were stacked against you? And that might seem like a really obvious question, But I want to know if there was a moment where you ever felt that the odds were stacked against you, and then how you circumvented or went right through those odds.
I think the odds were, I've always felt the odds were stacked against me, much like all of you on this call. In my undergraduate career, there were no African-American chemists, there were no African-American scientists. So let alone when I graduated and really went down the road of project management initially, there were no people of color, period. I couldn't find anyone that looked like me. And so what I really had to try and do was find mentors that were primarily men, not necessarily people of color. And so it really shaped the way in which I approach business and the way in which I engage with others. And that's a whole different conversation. But then kind of fast forward, I stepped out and did something most people would say was crazy 14 years ago. And I started a consultancy that does absolutely nothing except focus on the business of design and construction with and I was determined to not copy somebody else's business model. I was determined to put my toe in the water and be fully committed to a better way of doing business and a better way of engaging. And so with complete blinders, I've always felt like it was stacked against me. What I think I've always had though, like everyone else on this call, is conviction. And being fully convicted that this was the road and the direction that I was going to go, that I was going to stay the course, that I was going to learn whatever lessons I needed to learn that were going to come along with it, and use that to make my life and the lives of other people better, and specifically people of color. But it has been one challenge after another. I think my approach to it though is to step back at some point and always ask, okay, what am I supposed to learn from this? And then go right back in and keep going. I just don't capitulate.
Brilliant.
I can share. Yeah, I'd like to share something. So when I read that question, I was like, stacked against you. To me, it sounds like victim and can't get out. And I never felt like a victim. I've always felt like that there were going to be challenges. I'm the only one in the room, will probably always be the only one in the room, so deal with it, right? And so I tried not to let other people's perceptions, negative perceptions or assumptions guide me. That's your problem, right? But that takes effort. It takes a lot of work. And so I found myself spending a lot of time in my career on that. And so couldn't see what's coming in the future. I could never create the future. And that's why I'm thankful for the few people that I've met along the way who nudged me in the direction that I've gone.
I was gonna just also add a little bit. I share the same feeling probably that most of the panel has in terms of always feeling, yes, that, you know, it's been a very difficult road to survive and to accomplish, you know, what goals you had put in front of yourself. So the funny part is, again, growing up in Iran, you would think the stacks were really against life, being a woman in a, you know, a segregated society. However, women, you know, we supported one another. It was all of us, and then it was this other side. So in order to protect one another, we always looked after one another. When I came to United States, I felt actually the challenges were much harder because not only there were no mentors in the schools of architecture, or at least where I was, I mean, literally, guys, we had no female professor. So then in education, I felt there was a disadvantage because no one was there to support you because you were almost like not visible in a way. And then, you know, in life, yes, you know, as I am about to graduate and go and, in a way, live in the beautiful country that raised me, there is a revolution in that country, and which made it very difficult to go back and work under a very kind of religious, strict regime that took over. So, you know, on and on and on is wherever you go, there are these mountains in front of you that you have to climb. And honestly, the only way, yes, I have also survived is by going back to the mission, to what you put in front of yourself and focusing in that, believing in yourself, and to have my sister as a support, as my partner, as someone that we, you know, move together has helped me tremendously and helped our business tremendously. I think ultimately I have realized is about trust in one another and trust in society that is going to be fair, and leadership. We still, I think today, need women leaders, women with vision like yourself, like Cindy. The only opportunity and a break we got in very early on was Cindy Allen, out of the blue. I didn't even know who Cindy Allen was.
What?
Sorry, Cindy.
Thanks a lot.
In our 20s. Well, you called us and you said you're inducted in the Hall of Fame. We had built very little, but we were very hopeful. We were very much pushing every opportunity and every door. I think someone talked about this. Every little door that opened a little bit, you have to put your foot in there and push. And you say, you know what? Give me the opportunity and we can show you. I think in general, minorities, women, and people, I would say, that are different or they're outside or come from outside in the United States do have quite a bit of challenge that they have to get through. And that's unfortunate because I think it's time, and that's why we are all here together to open that up and not allow that to happen again.
If you get to know both the sisters, you see what an incredible support structure you have, right? That relationship. And by the way, so serious about architecture. Moshkan is like, she cracked the whip, that's for sure. But the support is there. And so I guess the question would be for others, what kind of support systems have you had?
I came from, I was born and raised in Chicago and raised by my mom, who, was divorced from my father, even though he was still in our lives. But there was just one strong woman after the other. And my mother, my sister, my grandmother, my aunts, my great-grandmother, my best friends, they just, I never felt like I had these obstacles in my way that I could not overcome because of them, and because I saw my mom do what she did, and just, I think she's just the most amazing person. I actually didn't realize that I was following her around the city of Chicago, literally moving like a block away from her. And right now in my townhouse, my mom is 2 townhomes over, and I rely on that strength. I rely on that support every single day. But I also want to say that I have found that support professionally, and it's with groups like this, these very women in this group, sorry guys, not just the women. I do find support with all genders, but it's been incredible to know that as you matriculate through your career, that you meet just inspiring people, and no matter their age, no matter their station in life, you find fuel in that. And I'm just eternally grateful for this, for forums like this, but for organizations, NOMA, AIA, AIAS. I mean, the students are incredible. And again, like Mavis, mentoring is a priority for me. But I just want to I just want to thank you guys for just being who you are and sharing yourself with others.
It's beautiful. Thank you.
Yes, Cindy, thinking about your question, you know, I actually realized that this notion of those people that set the bar high for you, you know, the people that you look at, you know, I look back and I think that people that got me through maybe all those challenges was knowing that my grandfather was a Cuban, you know, an immigrant to Cuba as a self-taught man that had nothing when he got there. And he built a business, a successful business. Then my mother left Cuba with 2 kids, a widow, and nothing, and absolutely nothing. And she made it through. I always thought to myself, my problems are small compared to that, right? So if I cannot make it through, I'm a loser. So I think this idea that whatever is put in front of you, you got to make it work because others have actually had to do more of that. And I think when I also look back about my passion for teaching, you know, I taught for 26 years when I was in Chicago. And it's because I felt like I needed to do that for others, right? I needed to be the person that said kind of a great model for young students of design where they can see that, you know, that design is amazing, that design is inspiring, and you need to, you have to be that role model so they can do better than you, so they can actually surpass what you're doing. And I think that's super important. And probably why we're all here is because we need to make this real for a lot of other people that are watching and realizing I want to be there. I want to be on that square talking to Cheryl and Cindy.
You talk about mentorship too, Carlos, and you were telling me the story about what, you know, when you came to the States and you were really insecure about speaking English and how you overcompensated and made it an advantage for you.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I think at the time I never thought that race was kind of the barrier for me. It might have been, but I didn't see it that way. It was something even more important. It was language. I really was unprepared to understand things well or even express myself. So what happened is I did a couple of things. I had to have other skills that others could see because I couldn't use language as that. So I ended up kind of trying to make the most incredible drawings that I could so the drawings could speak for me. And then the other thing was that I always took the most challenging assignments because I said, you know, nobody's going to notice me unless I do something that is really difficult. So I think this idea of always sort of realizing that you, maybe what you do is you say, I have to prove to everybody that I am also, that I deserve to be here. So.
I think that's kind of my story as well, Carlos, in not the language part, but having to prove yourself above and beyond that you deserve to be at the table. And, you know, I've encountered roadblocks along the way. I mean, started in the industry earlier than most of you, when there was a time when you would walk into a room and a hush would fall over the room because they just weren't prepared to see you. And, you know, what you do is you hold your head high and you keep moving forward and you don't let anybody squelch your dreams or your ability to prove that you deserve to be there. And that's how I've just kind of gotten through my career, basically, is to show and prove that this is what I do and I do it very well. But oftentimes you have to do it better than the next person that's sitting next to you in order for it to be really accepted. So there was a lot of that. There's not so much of that anymore, but in the beginning of my career, it took a lot. So it took a village around me to really help me get through that. So I made sure I would seek out people that were supportive of me, that, you know, were encouraging, and that's really what got me through. But like I'm saying, this group right here is amazing to have this happen today. You know, we're still having these discussions today, but at least we're discussing it, whereas we weren't before.
Right. You're so right, Mavis. The common thread that you mentioned, this notion of seeing the road and not the blocks, right? Carlos used the word conviction, and being really cognizant of who we are and our path. And I want to shift a little bit. I love the personal, but let's shift a little bit to connecting the personal to, you know, this common thread that we all share through the industry. We know that our industry has not been held high as an example of equity and diversity. And I don't want to necessarily turn it negative. I'd like to talk about the progress that we've made, but still the work that needs to be done. And, you know, because you've got global diversity in your title, Gabrielle, can I start that with you in a snapshot of our industry and maybe progress that you've seen, and talk a little bit about work that still needs to be done.
Right. So having that title for 7 years, I've been tackling this firm-wide, industry-wide, the whole nine. And we've made some progress. I would say today, I've seen more progress just in the fact that we're having a conversation with the word race in it. And having led this conversation for 7 years, that was still the one word, the one topic that everybody would just go, oh boy, here we go. And so I think that's some progress, but I forget who said it. It can't just be a moment. It's either now or never to really address what ails us as a profession. And I think we need to start with the work. How do we make purposeful work, as Carlos said, who's designing what and for who? Because I have seen that, and that's actually why I wanted to lead this for the firm, because we were not culturally competent and we certainly weren't representative of all the communities that we worked in across the globe. So I think that's our biggest challenge. And I would hope that we can get past making the public statements and the commitments and the scholarships. That's all very good. But we need to change the way we design. And we need to change who's designing it.
And so the team matters. Who's on the team matters.
Absolutely. Yeah, more than ever. And like I said, if we can't represent culturally, racially, gender, whatever, we must be steeped in research to be culturally competent to have that conversation and design authentically. You know, the 5 white guys going in to win a project in the Black community, unless they can really prove that they've done their research and they get it, it's not authentic. And I think it'll be irresponsible. It's been irresponsible. It's going to really be irresponsible. Sorry.
George, I inadvertently cut you off, and I know you wanted to say something. So let me call you out right now.
No, I think that is something to be said about, I was thinking about Cindy's question of, you know, where did you find your motivation and how did you render that? I remember walking into Greenville 4 years in a row and being the only African-American there. I remember sitting there and like not feeling uncomfortable, but wondering like why I was the only African-American in the room. And I asked a few people, Rick, Fadrizi, a couple others, and you began to see things kind of move. And I remember also when sustainability wasn't a topic that was well spoken, like, and when you would show up, and I think my point is that my motivation was actually proving that I belonged, right? So being in the industry of providing interiors and materials, you know, if you know anything about the Deep South, you know, it wasn't a whole lot of welcoming when I showed up at Interface as an African-American in South Georgia or at Mohawk. Like, it was the only African-American in a leadership position around sustainability. There were days where you really had to take a lot of pride in being not the smartest person in the room, but not anybody knowing more about the project than me. So you had to have a holistic perspective. And I think for me, that was more of a driver to make sure that I was able to establish myself career-wise with humility and dignity and demonstrate through the work and the effort, and not through anyone thinking that I was chosen to be in that space for any other reason. So I think that that intrinsic desire that all of the people on this panel actually have to just share your story. And I think that one of the lessons that I've learned, and I remember meeting Krystal for the first time, and she was looking at me and I was looking at her, and we said, hey, what's happening, right? So we had this conversation and we opened up, we dialogued, we told each other stories. And I think sometimes those storylines that you may not even remember that you shared are also motivation for other people who are in that pathway. And so I think it's important for people to intrinsically have that thing inside of them, that why that drives you for whatever reason to do this great work for people that you haven't seen and for legends that are legacies that are yet to come.
George, first of all, when you talk about what's inside of you, I just think about the first time I met you, which was actually when you were at Mohawk, and you were just beaming, you know? And so I just want to thank you, because that's how I remember you. That's how I remember you. And I just want to tell Mavis that like breaks my heart to hear that story early on, because there isn't anyone as you're elegant and beautiful and so talented. And I'm sorry you had to go through that.
It makes you tough, and it makes you really, you know, really stand behind your conviction. And it makes you stronger, actually. And because you just have that drive then to prove the world wrong, you know, and hopefully I've been able to do that.
And Mavis, I got a little emotional when you were talking about that too, similar to Cindy. And I appreciate you guys all like kind of paving the way for me to, again, I still am a lot of times the only one in the room, and it's more of my eyes are more open when I'm not the only one in the room. So George, that's probably why I gravitated to you. And Cheryl knows I ran up to her the first time I saw her, and you know, she didn't blow me off. All of you guys, like I mean, Gabrielle, we've really made a mess of some of those IIDA galas, being inappropriate sitting. It was her, not me, but but you know, like I do appreciate you guys paving the way, because it is something that I, as you know, a millennial, getting to see people like you guys in leadership positions, and knowing that that is something that I can strive to be also. So I appreciate y'all.
I wanted to add on and support what Gabrielle was saying, because one thing that I noticed that has changed is when she was talking about being at the table, like 5 white guys going in there is not going to do it. But community engagement is now kind of pushed to the forefront, almost to the point where it's a must do on projects, as well it should be, when you're bringing, especially for institutions that University of Chicago is a prime example. They used to build buildings on campus, beautiful structures, but they would turn their back on the community. And now there's more of a movement to bring the community to the table to help aid in the design process, so that they may not be a part of your design team, but they are part of the solution. They're part of the process.
We need to stay woke, and we need to listen, right?
Yeah.
The community, before you can help anybody, you have to listen to what the community needs. And
I also think though, we can't think of it as an overlay, community engagement. We need to do it all the time and really understand that. And that's what I mean by being culturally competent, and really, you don't have an answer until you've met with that community, until you've partnered with that community, right?
I think I parallel it. Cheryl, the difference between cultural appreciation and cultural appropriation. I think as an industry, we've experienced and we've seen cultural appropriation when people who are not of color walk into communities and presume to know, and then design solutions based upon that lack of knowledge. What this conversation suggests is that we finally need to move away from doing that to true cultural appreciation. Like Gabrielle and Dina said, if we do not have a person of color to be at the table or in the room leading the design, then we do truly need to be aware and appreciative and understand, internalize the struggles, the challenges, the issues of the people that you are being asked to design for, as opposed to presuming that you know the answer. And that's the difference in terms of appreciation and appropriation. The other thing that I would say that, at least for me, from what I've seen that's changed, much like Gabrielle, I say that the policy statements are wonderful, but what I really want to see now is funded. I really want to see firms move beyond what they say they're going to put on pieces of paper and truly move forward to actually moving it off of a piece of paper from a policy statement to actually funding it and turning it into organizational change, true organizational culture.
Mm-hmm. What can we do as individuals so that Krystal isn't alone in that board meeting? I think about the young Carlos at Ohio State, and he was, the only one in his class. That, you know, we've all had that experience of being either the first or the only, and it's a pretty damn lonely place to be, yet we've all done it, or the only woman, right? We've all done it, we've all been it. How can we ensure for this next generation of designers, of architects, folks in sales who want to work for manufacturers, what's our individual responsibility or obligation to make sure there are no more onlys?
With reaching out to, reaching out to some younger institute like high schools and junior high schools, exposing kids to the idea of this profession at large, because I don't think a lot of kids really think about it as something they can, really entertain. And I think it's us going out there and, giving presentations and encouraging these young people to go into our profession, because I think that's definitely lacking.
Yeah, maybe I think that's the bullseye right there. I think we need to, the strategy, you can't put a Band-Aid on this. You actually have to go to the source. And the source is that design itself is actually a very elitist career to a degree, because it's foreign, because it requires incredible investment of time. And it doesn't always have the rewards that other careers have. And that's challenging, especially if you come from an underprivileged, community, or, from families that don't have means and you want to really do better. And we know that's been happening in the arts for some time, and there's incredible progress that is being made around this, because if you don't have more voices that are authentically wanting to be there from that diversity, it's never going to change.
Carlos, tell the story about when you were doing nonprofit in Chicago and what happened.
Yeah, I was working with this incredible organization in Chicago, and Cheryl, you know Marvin in Chicago. And one of the interesting thing was that that one of the reasons why Marvin is so fundamental into the reinventing the arts is that they provide art education to underprivileged kids. And by the way, it's like 90% of these kids go to college. Often they're the first family member that goes to college. And their mission is not just to teach them art. Their mission is to teach them that art is a career, that you can make a living and you can be really sort of transformative. The art institutions realize that they need to make this happen, because they don't have a future if this diversity is not embedded into this industry. And that is what we need to do for design. We have to do that. We have to show that you can get a job, you can do well, that you can actually transform the world, transform the communities, and those numbers will start creating incredible impact.
I was going to grab you, Mike. I know you've been trying to say something, and I have a question for you. How important is representation? How important is it for young women, young men, people of color to see someone who looks like them successfully practicing design or architecture?
Well, I think that one of the interesting things about kind of the way that I grew up is that I grew up in a community of Black people, even when I was in college. So to me, I always had that support even through that point until I graduated. And it wasn't until when I graduated that I realized, where's everyone else at? Where are people that look like me that are supposed to be here in the industry? Essentially overwhelmed with that Black culture from the start of my career until I graduated school. So when I did get out of school, there was a serious lack of representation. And it wasn't until I found that amazing representation, or those amazing people that helped build me up as a designer, I wasn't able to truly see my path. I was somewhat oblivious to some of the things that some other people might have seen. I always just saw it as a challenge. It was always a challenge. And I always felt that it was something that if I couldn't make it right, or if I couldn't do better, that was on me and no one else. And I didn't realize that a lot of those challenges that I had were because of race. And I just naturally pushed harder and harder in order to achieve the goals that I was trying to do. And it wasn't until later in life that I started to realize that those challenges weren't normal to everyone else. It was something that was a really big eye opener. But to to what we were talking about before about seeing that diversity within our profession, it starts way earlier than college. It starts way earlier than high school. It starts in elementary schools and middle schools. It starts with the parents, right? I mean, how many times have we heard a story about someone saying that they would love to go into art or architecture or interior design, but their parents won't pay for it? Because guess what? They don't know that that is an industry for people of color to be successful in. So we have to reach out to the parents as well to show them the people of color who are doing these things and who are becoming very successful, and showing them that their children have a path for that. And it becomes very important for the community to understand that, and for you to rise as a community, because unfortunately there are spaces where people think that in order to be successful, you need to be a doctor, a dentist, a lawyer, an accountant, basketball player, or rapper. And we have to think beyond that. We have to be able to show people that there's more to it than that.
This also would make me believe that beyond all the discussion that we've had, early childhood, parents and all, I think our industry can do much better in recognizing diversity, diverse, intelligent, talented, designers. It's the media, and Cindy Allen has done an amazing job in that. And it's our industry with its awards. I mean, even up to date, how many awards goes to only a very few selected, old white male privileged, people? How many women have we? I think success, some of it is monetary, and I agree. I mean, when you see people making a lot of money, you want to, kind of pursue that, thing. But a lot of it is also what you see. As you said, if you see it, you can be it. And so when you see women, award-winning women who've built amazing projects, then you think, well, I can do that. I want to be that. The same way that now, we are facing in politics. The fact that now, for the first time, we may actually have an African-American Indian woman vice president is pretty amazing. This is how we can, I think, improve and go forward. Yes, it is true that we need to change our models of education. Even thinking about our models of design. I mean, the way we teach design in schools is still on the same kind of model that for thousands of years men have taught us how to design. I mean, if you want to start basic, we have to question everything. Why? Maybe that's not the only way or the appropriate way of designing and approaching a plan or planning. So, the history of the world in general has been, written by very few people. And they had to be, of a certain gender from Europe. Nevertheless, now that we recognize it and we understand that, I think I was reading this, uniformity of thought is a debt of thought. This is a Time magazine, New York Times writer, Roger Cohen, who wrote in an article. It is true. If we all become one idea and one way of designing and one way of awarding and one way of recognizing, then there is no design. Our diversity and our unique voices and our unique points of view is what makes design go forward. And so to me, architecture and design, not only you need to recognize that diversity is the fuel of it and the fuel for the future, but I think we as leaders of the industry can do much better in searching and making sure that for, you know, everything that we do in terms of recognition and rewards, you know, we consider and find others. I mean, this is our job to find, you know, women, men of, you know, color, of different backgrounds, to be recognized.
Hey, so I have something to say on that. Okay, first of all, the reason why I inducted you when you didn't know me was because you were different and you were special. And I know Gisue for many years and love her to pieces. And she sits in that space where she and her sister have constantly gone up against men to build buildings. You know, they do a lot of interior design work because they're not, you know, building the museums that they want, although you're doing something really nice in China. But I just want to say that, you know, when I became editor, it was right at 9/11. And so the market crashed. And for me, I wasn't going to, you know, and interior design was primarily a domestic magazine. And I completely went overseas because we needed to see the great design, and we weren't having it during this recession. And it changed everything sort of for me, as well as, I don't know, like I think, you know, design loves every color of the rainbow. So like for me, I don't feel that the way you do, Gisue, but that's because I do believe that you are pitted up against, like, you know, strong, right? You know, architects that.
One thing that is really interesting about this conversation is that we're identifying that there's no silver bullet to this problem, that this is a multi-pronged, that we all have to activate ourselves in the areas that we feel we have influence. Right. Because the same way that we need recognition and the same way that we need visibility, I think I go back to what Mike was saying, you know, in this idea that we have to prove that this is also a great place for everybody. And, you know, there's a great organization. It's called SNAP, stands for Strategic National Arts Alumni Program. And one of the things they're doing is they're quantifying the fact that people that go to school for liberal arts and all those disciplines that a lot of parents might consider to be really not a great place to invest and for your kids to be happy, prove that they're data-based, and they are proving that the happiest people on their jobs are people that have liberal arts. They do as well as a lot of other, these professions like medicine and lawyer, especially in that kind of mid-level tier. And the other thing is that they are the best problem solvers, and companies need that because our training is all about abstraction and complexity. So that's the message that we need to get out there. So people can realize, oh my God, that's an amazing platform. I can do so much with that. And that's one thing that is going to help change the metrics around sort of, you know, the diversity around the table.
Yes,
I love Gisue's point about questioning everything. And, you know, there's that West African proverb that says, until lions have a historian, the history of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. And, you know, we need to retell our story. And even going back again to the academy, to education, we keep bringing up those infamous 5 old white men. I'm picturing these 5 white men sitting out there thinking, oh, they're coming after us again. The story of design is told in so many different ways that embrace humanity, not a segment of humanity, but all of humanity. And, you know, storytelling is our expertise. And I think we may need to rethink of how we tell the story of design.
I was thinking about it when you mentioned representation, Cheryl. I, you know, graduated from college in 2005, and I don't think I saw another Black interior designer until 2009, or met my first. And so I was wondering, in thinking about you guys, like, you probably didn't have any representation, but you still kind of pushed through it to become architects and designers. So we do have to get ourselves out there. Mike, you said everything that I wanted to say. I think it starts at home. I mean, and I like to say that I'm an interior designer because I'm not good at rapping. So that's why I'm an interior designer. But, you know, those are things that we all see out there in the media, you know. And then when I think about awards too, like Cindy, when we met the first time, you're like, well, why don't I know you? Well, I work at a small firm in Texas, right, and we don't have time to apply for awards or to submit. our photos to Interior Design Magazine. And so, but that's something that maybe we need to make time for. So I think there are a few hidden gems that just aren't having the PR people or the marketing folks out there to actual business development out there to actually reach out to people like you or Cheryl to be part of these award situations. So I love that you just found some people too. You know, I love that. So I think that's the thing, is that we need to think about how we can bring those folks in, or maybe support them in putting themselves out there.
You know, the most fun we have, because so right now I'm judging Best of Year awards. I'm looking at over 2,000 awards from all over the globe. And they're, you know, and it's got to be 15 countries. And there is nothing like seeing a project that I never saw before from somebody I don't know who they are. It really, that to me is everything. And actually a lot of younger designers, and especially globally, that is how they get their name out there. They submit to awards. So it is you know what, Krystal, you make sure that your firm spends a little time to submit. It doesn't take that long.
But I think we have to think about this not as such an elite practice that we're doing and service that we're offering, but it's for everybody.
Right.
Everybody deserves to have a nice space. And, you know, when I think about the work that Samuel Mockbee was doing, and that, you know, just giving people a sense of dignity and, you know, a home, and, you know, that being more inclusive, I think, and I know that's a big proposition, but I think that's going to, we need to represent the world, the country, more broadly than we have been.
Mavis, this question comes up a lot from a practical standpoint. How can we ensure that we're designing the most equitable spaces possible?
I think it does have to do with listening to what the needs are of the people that you're trying to serve. You know, I think that before you go in with a drawing, you need to sit down and listen and meet with people and understand what are the problems that we're trying to solve. And I think not only will that help you partner with someone, they'll trust you better because they understand that you are actually there to help them and you're not just trying to impose something on them. So I think it starts with listening.
Something I never thought about, I was listening to a panel a few weeks ago. We had our Austin Design Week, and it mentioned, and one of the guys mentioned that us as people of color, we are super, like, we're relationship based. And I can see that, like, when you're saying we need to listen and kind of have that relationship with our clients. So some people just go in and, you know, have a design solution right away, but listening and having that relationship and that back and forth, I think is important, probably for most of us on this panel, but knowing that that's something that helps us to solve the problem better in the design world.
I was going to say, this brings it back up to the beginning of this conversation, to that notion that it used to be the time where community engagement was a choice, right, or an option. And now what it is actually where the projects begin. And if you really start the project by community engagement, by listening and realizing what's needed, I think that will guarantee, that becomes sort of the foundation that you build a project from. And that's where you create that equity.
And it's kind of odd that for us, that seems so natural. And I think it's because of the way we were taught. We were taught in school that this is an elitist. We're experts. We're the godlike saviors. We tell people what they need. And that's where this whole discussion has to start to change, is in schools. Because if we continue to teach in the Western way and not including any representation of architects like us, designers like us, cultures, you know, then this will just be a moment. And I do know that most schools are tackling this, and if they're not, they will be soon. I think the students of color are really challenging and demanding a new way of education. And we as practitioners should push those schools. This is the kind of people that we are going to hire. These are the kind of people that we want to build our practice around. So what are you doing about it?
Who do you want to hire next? Any of you? Who do you want to hire next? What competencies, what skills, knowing this post-pandemic world that we're moving into? Who are you looking for? What's their skill set?
Black designers.
Yeah, we've been talking about reaching out to historically Black colleges. That's something we never really did when we were looking for the next group of interns. And, you know, why not? You know, why haven't we? I mean, I know that we are art school centric, you know, we have our favorites in the area, but we should be reaching out to a broader group of people. And if historically Black colleges are a good source for that as well. Mike, did you say you went to Howard? You attended Howard?
Did.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, some great, you know, come out of these schools. So,
Howard, we're going to take you to Morehouse first, right?
Yeah, come on, George.
A little bit of a rivalry there.
So Cheryl, you asked a great question about competencies. And the Society of Human Resource Professionals identifies something like 52 different competencies. So I would be more specific. I want people who can listen. I want people who can be empathetic. I want people who have good judgment and understand client service and what it means to be of service to others. I want universities and colleges and institutions to understand that I need them to develop more than the skill of a student. I need them to develop the competencies of those individuals so that they can engage and interact in problem solving. And I think there's a dearth there that has to be addressed. That's a bigger conversation for a different day. Yeah. But those would be the real specific competencies that I would look for, that as I go into organizations all around the country, virtually, physically, those are the things that I continue to see that are missing. And we can cultivate the skills, but we've got to get to the competencies.
You know, as design firms are becoming more intradisciplinary, right? Because they are seeking those skills, and those skills don't necessarily have to come from someone that went to a design school, because the design is so much more complex. One thing that's really important about that is that if the argument is that the pool among designers of Black designers is small, then recruit Black people in all these other professions where they're probably incredibly equipped to bring not only their discipline, but also their perspective. And that should be a low-hanging fruit. So that's one thing that I always say is like, let's continue to build more interdisciplinary firms, and let's make sure that that's where we sort of bring all this diversity. Which, by the way, they also will be outsiders criticizing design from a very healthy perspective.
That's right. That's right. Cindy, I think that's our next conversation about preparedness and developing and nurturing and retaining diverse talent. Like, that's a whole other roundtable discussion.
Yeah, I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
Hey, Cheryl, this is Joe. One interesting scenario. I had a difficult conversation with an organization that's affiliated with flooring manufacturing. I'll just say that, right?
With what? With what manufacturing? Sorry.
Flooring manufacturing, and they were trying to find some alternatives, and we're going to create this competition and put money with it. Called out Stanford, MIT, Harvard. They kept calling out these schools they're going to send this to. And I said, well, why wouldn't you send it to Tuskegee or Morehouse or Harvard? And he was like, well, why would I send it to Tuskegee? I was like, you do know that George Washington Carver created paint from the peanut and sweet potatoes back in the 1800s. Like, they have to have some form of system where they have people there who can actually compete for the project. They have an architectural program, they have a design program, and they were almost ready to fund a program at the University of Georgia through this organization rather than these other institutions that already had programs in place. And so I threatened to resign from the committee. And that was the only reason that they would do it. But it was just interesting that how far the length that they would go for a simple competition to look at some alternative materials for a flooring solution was just like, it was not even in your mindset to do research enough to see which institutions could actually provide you with some of those solutions, and diversity definitely wasn't a part of the conversation. So ended up, they did the bid and Tuskegee won the competition hands down. But it was that you had to almost strong arm the committee in order to get them to even consider the organization. And sometimes it's lack of knowledge, and sometimes it's lack of wanting to have that knowledge. And so have to do both and make sure that we keep things in the forefront in terms of that.
that's such a good example of you using your power and your influence. I think we all have to push our organizations to think broader, right? There's so much narrowness in our world and in the world. And I think it's our duty, it's our obligation as women, as minorities, as people of color, to push. Like, again, I'll go back to what Gisue said, question everything and then push.
I agree.
I think another topic that might be good for us too is, I know Gabrielle, you've been doing this for a long time, but how do you bring this conversation to the table within your organizations? You know, we've started gathering names and putting the word out there if we're interested in putting together a committee to talk about DE&I. And we've got people that are really interested, but, you know, without having somebody who's like, really has some experience, like a chief people officer or something like that. I mean, how do you really get the conversation going in a successful and productive way? And I think that that's kind of what we're struggling with right now. So that might be something we can talk about at some point in the future.
Mavis, you've told me that TPG has always been pretty open and has been a diverse organization. What do you think some of that, where did that come from? How can you take something that you've learned from there to share with others?
Well, I think that's part of the issue. It's like, how do you share this with others, and how do you frame it in such a way that you can also bring other people within the organization along? You know, I think that it starts by having a diverse partnership. You know, we have a pretty diverse partnership, and you know, so it sort of begs for different points of view to be brought to the table, but I think that we need to take that further, and we're looking to take that further and expand it into a greater group, not just the partnership. And we found that, you know, we're not good at this because we haven't really had this conversation or topic before, you know, where we really had to act on it. And so I think, you know, I was going to tap into Gabrielle a little bit to see if, you know, there's a checklist or something that would be helpful to help us kick this thing ground. But I think that we have a pretty open and responsive partnership that is interested. We meet every morning at 8 o'clock on Zoom, and we talk about all kinds of things, not just business, but life. And, you know, this conversation comes up a lot, and everybody's interested in kind of getting better and being better and always growing and always thinking, getting ahead of the curve. And this time is ripe for that conversation, right? So
absolutely, now's the time. And
yeah, we acknowledge we need help.
And I'm glad to share with you whatever I can. I've spoken to many of our competitors and other firms and organizations who want to know how to get the conversation started. So I'm glad to spend an hour with your people or send you some information, but I think that's how it happens. I think having the conversation is absolutely number one. Even if you put your neck out there and say, look, this is where everybody's going. Mm-hmm. And if you're not doing it for the right thing, for the good thing, do it for the right reason, right?
Exactly, exactly.
You know, we have a 12-person firm, and I am majority owner of the firm, but I also have two partners that, you know, I love them. They're fantastic, but we've had to have, I wouldn't say difficult, not difficult for me conversations, but difficult for them. And I think now, like Gabrielle said, now is the time to do it. So every time I get an opportunity, of course, we're not in the office now. It's a little challenging, but just making sure that at every little aspect, for instance, our consultants, we were going after a project. There's a woman that I know who was vice president of a major global structural engineering firm who now has started her own firm. And she's minority and and minority and a woman. And I wanted to use her on a project, and immediately there was a pushback, but the conversation was had. The scope of the project, the scope of her services would have been very small on the project, thereby giving her an opportunity. And just having the conversation with one of my partners about it, you know, he understood, you know, just not giving up, just being persistent and making sure we do take advantage of this moment.
And if you look at it as you have to challenge the status quo from A to Z with what we do every day, ask yourself a question, is this going to get me to be more equitable, more diverse, more inclusive? The consultants, the clients you're working for, the policies that you're just accepting cold, like not, you know, we're staying in our lane. Oh no, that's not mine. I can't do that. Well, we have to figure out where the barriers are and help not either tear them down or help not be part of the problem.
It's a difficult conversation to have on both sides of the table, right? For so long as a Black community, you didn't talk about those things and the problems that you had, or the, you know, the challenges that you face. You were always told that's just the way that it is as a Black person, and you just had to keep pushing on. So it's also a challenge for Black people to kind of talk about that. And we all have to be understanding that it is a difficult conversation on both sides, and that we have to work together. And if we don't have those challenging conversations, we will never get anywhere. And that's the reason why it's so important to talk about those things.
Yeah, I was gonna, Mike, where I was gonna go with that, and I think in a very similar vein, you know, as Black people, we are more at risk for being reported to HR. We are more at risk for being, you know, put on the spot at work. How, Gabrielle, I'm coming to you specifically again, how would you advise a young Black designer to either go to their studio director or go to their HR director when they see that a conversation needs to be held in their firm? How can they feel safe doing that, knowing that, you know, 9 times out of 10, they're more at risk than perhaps other employees?
If there's ever a time to use your voice as a person of color or a woman or whatever, is now. Because the business as usual is changing. And so, and I know it's hard for young people to feel like they can say something, but we have to advocate for ourselves. And we have to call stuff, I was gonna say another word, we have to call it as we see it, right? And so we just have to speak up. And if you can't speak up, find somebody that you trust who can be your voice. Yeah. And you call me. I mean, it doesn't have to be even if somebody in the firm, but somebody to encourage you and walk you through it. I mean, that's what this is all about.
People have to understand what the power is of their voice. What you heard in Dina and having that difficult conversation was the recognition that she had power in the voice, not just shares. And even a young person who has a challenge within their own organization has a power in their voice, even if that voice takes them outside of the organization or to another allied who is willing to listen, and then not just help them navigate it, but might actually advocate with them for change. And I've seen a number of organizations have to take that approach because the young people are not supported internally. There aren't enough other people of color who understand. There isn't enough comprehension in order to be able to do that. So sometimes the best opportunity is to go outside and then come back in.
That's great. Karen, I'm going to co-sign that, power in your voice. George, I think you were going to say something.
I think that, you know, on the flip side of that, also, as leaders in these organizations, we need to make ourselves available on our sweet spot when somebody comes to us. Sometimes we have to coach on things that are not your sweet spot, but you can give them the right questions, the right approach, the right format, how to present information, not to respond 24 hours in an email when you're pissed off, like all of those things that you need to coach people through so that they don't put themselves in a position where now they can't have a voice because they moved in the wrong direction because there was no one there to really coach them. Because most of the time you don't get a second or third chance. So just to try to position it appropriately and try to be a good coach. And that extends to being a coach outside. So I've had people call me from my competitors that were young sustainability leaders and other work, and they reached out like, hey, I'm hitting the wall here. I feel like I got a glass ceiling. you know, how would you approach me having this conversation? Who can I talk to? And sometimes it's just a matter of listening through. And if you've been through that experience, you can just kind of give them some pointers of how to build up your professionalism, how to have the right conversation, when to have the right conversation, you know, how to approach that, who else external can have some influence over that conversation, making yourselves available for that as an external coach. And I know we all are pressed for time, but, you know, once or twice a week, I get an inbox or an email, student or someone who's just asking questions. You just have to take time to scroll through on the weekends and take a couple minutes to respond, make yourself available.
Absolutely. So, hey, Cindy, you know, all of these people in these squares are, they're working, they're speaking, they're on panels. There are a couple on here, I can't even look at you all anymore because I've asked you to be on like 10 panels. And right, the road is long and it's difficult and we're working from home, we're tired. You know, there's a fair amount of exhaustion, and let's talk about wellness. Let's talk about emotional health with the little bit of time we have left.
Especially now when the conversation around design is about wellness. But hello, what about how is everybody really doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd like to add to Krystal's comment about what did you say, that you never say no? Part of my wellness is learning when to say no, and not overload like I always do, but also making sure I say yes to the right thing. Of course, always to Cheryl, always. But learning how to say no is one of the things that I try to do to help, or that my family makes me do to help relax me. Of course, tennis. I love tennis, but I hurt my wrist, so I haven't been able to do that. So I have to turn to other forms of movement, but the big one for me is learning when to say no. So Krystal, I know you're going to say yes to a lot of things, but just keep in mind you are allowed to say no.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
I want to also add to this. The pandemic and the COVID-19, we finally have learned how to kind of stay on our feet and, you know, ignore it by wearing our mask and, you know, doing the appropriate things. But I have to tell you, the most stressful thing for me has been the election, the presidential election, and the fiasco that we are still in. That, you know, threw me completely off, because I just could not believe that this country is still, you know, has so much issues with, you know, race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation. I mean, these are the conversations that we have to have without, you know, without even thinking about it being one-sided. We have to share and grow together. So anyways, that has been for me the most difficult beyond the COVID-19. But I have to tell you, what I have decided that maybe would be helpful is once in a while to just kind of, again, go inside yourself and do something that you always wanted to do, because now maybe there is less pressure, less you know, construction going on, less projects. And I'm going to promote this. I have been working on a humanitarian project, which is this belief that every human being has to have dignity by having a home. It's not acceptable to see homeless people worldwide, especially in the United States of America. It's not acceptable to see people who are leaving homes due to wars that they didn't cause, living in army camps. It's not acceptable to me to allow human beings suffer in this way. So bringing all of that out, I have finally, you know, worked on this project to create something that in a way would be inexpensive and potentially easily affordable and transportable.
And on that note, Gisue, I think Cheryl and I, you know, we were talking about that we always want to end on one last piece of positivity. Gisue, that's yours for sure. That, you know, everyone should, no one should be homeless. So does everyone have one bit to share?
I can jump in and say something positive that I've done during this pandemic. I feel like whenever a big movement happens, art and music follow, and they do really play a pivotal role in how we see change and how we can expect change. I have started following a couple artists on social media that have been very inspiring. Kehinde Wiley, who did the portrait of Barack Obama. Kadir Nelson is another kind of very talented artist that has gotten me more involved in back to doing more portraits and sketching more outside of work. I think that has been the one thing that I think that is really interesting to see how art kind of changes as these big movements start to happen with like Black Lives Matter and such. And then the other thing is my grandfather. My grandfather is 94 years old, and every weekend I am at his house. And you know, because he lives outside of DC, and I love driving out there to get away from the hustle and bustle of the city. And I thought that I would never be able to have this much time with him. And it's really great to kind of talk to him about his experiences and what he saw, and how he went through those things back in the 20s. So it's been very an enlightening experience for me to kind of understand my history and my culture a little bit better. So those are the things that have been really positive that I've been able to pull away from this, because I'm sure that if we were not in this pandemic, I probably would not have been able to have that much time with him, which is very special to me.
So I've always relied on art and music to get me through life in general, and it also inspires me. But now I've also added teaching myself how to play the harmonica. So I'll play you a song one day as soon as
Wow.
I love that.
That's awesome. I'm gonna chime in with Mike, is that I have the opposite end. I have I guess he's almost 2 years old. So I've gotten to spend a lot more time with my son, who I wouldn't maybe have gotten to spend as much time with, and just seeing things from a child's eye. You know, all of us are curious, and that's probably why we're in this industry. And so just seeing him figure out things for the first time has been pretty exciting. And those are things that I maybe wouldn't have gotten to do if I was working all the time.
I'm a huge Formula One fan, and I don't really have too many people to discuss Formula One with, and my mother and my sister both have taken it up just so that I could have conversations with them. But what's more important about this is that the 7-time world champion, Lewis Hamilton, is a Black man from, you know, very meager means from Stevenage, I think, in England. And he came from very little means. His father worked multiple jobs to get him a go-kart that he purchased from the back of a newspaper. And this man has said, I'm going to make my mark. Even from a 13-year-old kid, he knew what he wanted to do, like you, Gabrielle. He knew what he wanted to do, and he did it. And he was just crowned 7-time world champion, which is it ties Michael Schumacher, a German. It ties his record. So he's on his way to breaking the record. But what's great about that is he's using his platform. His helmet has a Black Lives Matter fist on it. He's always wearing the Black Lives Matter face masks. There's something that people don't see when they show the races here, but there's always, we race as one by Formula One. He's gotten Formula One to change the way they look at the sport and trying to be more inclusive. Mercedes has changed the way the car looks. They've changed the livery to an all black livery for the two cars, but they're known as the Silver Arrow. So he's using his voice and he's inspiring people all over the world to do the same. And so it's not just I'm not just a fan of fast cars, but I'm a fan of what Lewis is doing with his position.
Yeah. Number 44.
Beautiful.
So like Krystal, although I don't have a 2-year-old, I have a 19-year-old who would normally be away at school, but she's not. She's in the dining room school. But it's the silver lining has been being able to spend quality time with her and really see her development, challenges and not. And so being there present instead of just, getting on a plane, going somewhere that Cheryl made me go, or something like that. So that's been a real blessing because I have no hobbies. So
I think the family time has been the best part. Gabrielle and I laugh all the time that we have the same kid, just a different gender. So my 19-year-old son is in the dining room also doing school, and I wish he was away too. And then I have a 15-year-old. But I've enjoyed watching them grow and develop and really truly for the first time in their lives, really experience an obstacle, because in their lives, they really haven't experienced the obstacles, challenges that I had when I was growing up. And so to kind of see them navigate that space and place and really spend time with them, and them connecting to their grandparents too, who are also in their 90s. So that's been amazing.
So 2 things around the health and wellness thing. I picked up a new hobby, which is cycling. I bought me a nice expensive Trek bike, and I've been using it on the Beltline 3 times a week, and it's turned into a group of us who now go. And in all honesty, I don't know if Mike even knows this, but a couple of years ago, Mike and I had a conversation and we were talking about supporting our HBCUs. And I got mad at Mike after that conversation and went back and I started a committee with my fraternity to create an endowment at Morehouse, and it yesterday hit $500,000. So with the members of my fraternity, they committed to giving of their budget back to the school to create an endowment to give scholarships. And so we plan to be at $2.5 million in 3 years. So that's what I kind of committed to. Mike, I don't know if you remember that conversation. We were talking about Howard and Morehouse, and I was saying we need to do a better job of giving back. And you mentioned some things that you were doing, and I got mad. So I went back and started some good trouble.
I was about to say, that sounds like good trouble to me.
Yeah.
That's a good mad, if anything.
Absolutely.
Cheryl, what about you?
It's not the harmonica, but I'm taking piano lessons virtually. I played as a kid and then stopped, and so I've picked it back up again. Spending a lot of time with my own kids, kind of reattaching. I can't wait until they hopefully both come home for Christmas. And then Cindy, I'm a bookworm, so I've been not that I have a lot of extra time, but I am spending more time reading because I've been watching way too much Netflix. So, but I've been reading the stories of composers' lives to kind of companion my taking the piano lessons. So maybe Mavis and I can team up, and at a Formula One race with Dina, we can give a hell of a concert.
You're on for that, for sure.
What about you, Cindy?
I keep thinking about my mom. So I just lost my mom. She was 95, and for 30 years, she lived in India helping the poor. She was amazing. She's a great inspiration to me and the reason why I do believe in service. But I keep thinking about my mom, who took her last breath. It was Indian breath, And now she's in heaven and she's dancing because there's going to be an Indian VP. And it just gives me so much hope for the future. And it just touches my heart to be with all of you and also think about her at the same time.
Yeah. I think for all of us, even though the road ahead of us we know is going to be complicated, we're so blessed and so fortunate to do what we do, to be who we are, to have a platform and a position to offer representation and inspiration and the benefit of our experience. But as much as we're out there teaching and being examples, we're all learning. I think that's what inspires me so much about the group of folks on here. You all are consummate students as well. And I think that the profession is so fortunate to be graced by each one of you. And I am honored by the friendship of every single one of you, and truly thankful to each of you for sharing your hearts and your souls and your minds on this conversation. And Cindy, thanks to you, to Interior Design for partnering with IIDA and opening this platform. This is the first of many conversations.
Absolutely. And Cheryl and I were saying originally that battles are won through great coalitions, and you guys are a part of it now. That's it. It's official. And as Cheryl said, we look forward to more. So big virtual hug to everybody.
Yeah. Hugs to all.
Pluribus unum.
Wow, Cheryl, like what a conversation, huh?
That conversation leaves me breathless.
I know. They were also like open and generous and truthful and also positive.
The honesty and the bravery of every single one of those folks to share their moments, to share their memories, it was incredible. And so in taking that, right, I want to honor that conversation.
Me too.
I want to honor that conversation with action.
Right.
And
then you and I said, we're never going to do this unless we're not going to do it just to do it. We're going to do it because we want to make a difference, right?
And it has to stand for something,
right?
And it needs to result in something.
Mm-hmm.
And so knowing that every single one of those folks we know has literally, I don't think I'm exaggerating, has fought for their right to be in this profession.
Yeah.
And they are intensely and intrepidly concerned about the next generation.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, what is it that we can do to help promote and celebrate the current generation of design and the next generation of design? And to that end, we're going to be debuting the Talent Collective,
right.
which an effort between our two organizations that is all about illuminating, exposing, and celebrating the talent that hasn't always been seen or heard or acknowledged in our industry.
Right. And you know, like we both, for actually lots of different reasons, are beyond excited about that. Like as an editor, that's all I want to do is expose talent, honestly. And that's what gets me up in the morning and gets me charged. This has a different kind of meaning, but certainly changing people's lives for the better in their career is something that we both has always been like close to our like DNA of what we do, right?
Yeah. And as a professional membership organization, you know, typically IIDA is concerned with your work, but we're concerned with your life.
Right.
And right, we want to affect you in a lifelong way. And so what the Talent Collective is going to allow us to do is gather talent out there, as I said, that hasn't typically been seen or heard. And whether it's for an employment opportunity or whether it's for exposure in Interior Design Magazine, talent that hasn't always been seen or acknowledged or realized. Manufacturers or firms will be able to look at the talent collective as a resource when they say, I need to find a Black or brown designer. I need to find a designer under the age of 25, because so many people don't get that exposure for whatever reason. And
for whatever reason.
The reason isn't always a malignant reason.
Right. No.
It's just there is a lot of talent out there, but depending on where you are and where in your work, you may be from the tiniest firm, right? In Fargo, and you're not necessarily coming across those folks.
Right. Like Krystal was saying, who's like in a small firm, she said, we don't always, we don't actually submit for awards competitions. And
That's
I'm
right.
like, but you should. Like,
right.
You should spend the time and do it, because you know what? It'll expose you in a way that you hadn't before. So there's a lot of ways to educate people, but also by creating like a new structure to help people feel like it's okay.
Yeah.
That honestly, it's going to be good for you, for me, for them, for the community. Like it's all a positive.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just a new way to look at how we recruit talent, how we retain talent, the ability for folks to be able to tell their stories, expose their portfolios. It's going to be an exciting, really structured way. I can't even begin to figure out the technology, but thank goodness we know people.
There's that.
We know people who can do that.
Right.
But it's a pipeline for people who maybe haven't always had a pipeline extended to them.
Right. We're going to find a new pipeline for them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. We want to make it less hard for people to be where they need to be and to be seen where they need to be seen.
Right. And it's going to explode. It's going to be like fabulous. Right. And we're going to be like, yeah, we did that.
I think, Cindy, of all of those designers that we don't know yet, who will be gathered and convened within the talent collective and will have their work and their lives promoted. And it's going to be an amazing legacy for the magazine and for IIDA. And so many people are doing so many things, and I admire and support that, but I'm glad that we have identified something that just resonates for both of our organizations.
Absolutely. So we have a lot to look forward to next year. First of all, getting out of 2020.
Yes.
And then our DesignUnity initiative and our talent collective. I mean, you can't get much better than that, right?
You cannot. It's real, it's human, and it's going to work.
It's going to work.